Hi, welcome back. We're in Templeton, Iowa right now. We're at, actually it's a Harvest Host member, and we're at Templeton Rye Distillery. So we're going to be going on a tour a little bit and maybe doing a tasting, which I'm excited to do. So stay tuned. Today what we're going to do is we're going to go to a Harvest Host location, and it's called Templeton Rye, which is a whiskey, and it's made in Templeton, Iowa. And we're going to go on a tour, we're going to check it out.
It's really a very impressive place. They've done a very nice job, and it smells really good in here too. I don't know why, but it's going to be fun to go on the tour, I think.
Templeton was established in 1882. See that up there? It was the railroad that came through here at that time that created Templeton, and that was the Chicago-Milwaukee line. Stuttgart, Germany is where the majority of people came from to our area. Now the reason for that, from what I understand, is before even the First World War, that's when they started coming over, and they were farmers. Well, when you would get over to the United States, you would see all these flyers telling you that if you go on a train, steam engine train, to this location, you could get free or cheap land. Well, those farmers, they snatched that up in a heartbeat, so that's how they ended up in our area. Now, what was good about that is, because they were Germans, they were already making alcohol. So the next thing I'm going to tell you about is our blacksmith during the time of Prohibition. But he was a very good blacksmith, and he was the man to go to in Carroll County during Prohibition. But here's why. So during Prohibition, remember, this is wartime. You're not getting a lot of metals imported. Okay? So he's not getting sheet metals, at least not very much. So how's he going to make these stills? He's a creative man. He would take other objects like copper pots, make them into stills. Or you see over here, there's a copper water tub. That's a still. He knew how to repurpose things and make them into stills. Now, that in itself is a talent, but also the fact that you have to be able to solder your metals together and not kill somebody with lead poisoning. Yeah, he knew what he was doing. He also was known for melting down copper pennies to help with his process. And he did do stills for Alphonse Kirchhoff, which is the reason we're standing here today. Okay? But he also made stills for this gentleman, Joe Erlbeck. Now, Joe Erlbeck, we give a lot of credit to for really starting the bootlegging thing in this area. Joe Erlbeck was 21 years old and figured out no matter how little money people have, they'll buy alcohol. Okay, let's put that Catholic thing back in here. So, Prohibition. Prohibition era technically is 1920 to 1933. Prohibition actually was signed into effect in 17. They just didn't fully start enforcing it until 20. Okay, the Depression, 1929. You ask the old guys from around here, they will tell you, no, the Depression started at the same time as Prohibition around here. They called it the Grain Depression. So, when you have a Catholic community with a whole bunch of kids, and you have the grain depression going on where they're not selling their grain, so they have no money, how do you feed that many kids? That's where it came in. And so this 21-year-old figured it out. Well, they're going to buy alcohol, so we're already making our own alcohol. Let's just start selling some of it. Yeah, that worked. He did really well.
Real well, probably.
Real well, yeah. So he then starts getting other people involved. I mean, he said had some of his friends and stuff, family even, that would start under him, doing business with him. And then there was other people who kind of caught on to the idea and just started making their own. Kirchhoffs, they kind of helped out at first and then broke off on their own. So you're going to hear a lot of people that talk about that time frame, and they're going to say, well, there is no single original recipe. But then you're going to have families that say, no, mine's the original recipe. And then another family says, no, mine's the original recipe. They're all original recipes. They are, because at that time, this German family, this German family, this German family, they were all making their own. And they just used those recipes. Okay? Now, you're also going to find that during Prohibition, there were not just rye whiskey being made around here. There was corn whiskey too. Rye whiskey was new to our area. It was the blacksmith before weed that was the first one to put rye in their whiskey locally. His name was Herbert Hoover. Not the president, just the same name. It's just kind of funny. But yeah, he was a blacksmith, and for some reason he tried putting rye in his whiskey, and it became very popular. So he's really the one who converted that, I guess, of flavors. So during Prohibition then, you had rye whiskey and corn whiskey. So when we get done today with the tour, you'll be trying rye whiskey and corn whiskey. This is more the size of barrel they would have used back during Prohibition if they did age their alcohol. So keep in mind, you're not even supposed to make alcohol, it's Prohibition, okay? So there was no rules, no regulations. But if you got access to, because it's all about repurposing things because you have no money, this was the size of barrel that was more likely to be found. And commonly what they wanted to find was actually gunpowder barrels. If you want to char your barrel, it makes it a lot easier, right? It's got more flavor. But those were the popular ones. Size of still. This is typically close to the size of still. It would have been around the 30 gallon. But this is a post-Prohibition still. You see it's made of sheet metal. Okay, Prohibition, after it ended, war was getting to be not an issue. You could find sheet metals again. But this is actually one of Joe Earlbeck's. He did use this one. We know he really got it started for us. He wasn't the only one, but he was the main one that got it started. Well, now if you start getting more people and more people involved, you got to get some higher ups involved so that you can keep it under wraps. You've also got to start using those nicknames. You got to start using signs and symbols, okay? Because otherwise people are going to catch on. Well, one of the helpful people happened to be our local sheriff. Yeah, I know. They get a bad rap, but he was a good guy. He really was. He actually used a sign or symbol to let people know the feds were coming, because back then the feds had to contact him and say, we're coming to your area. So he then didn't just go out and blab to everybody, hey, the feds are coming. No, he was a good guy. Instead, he used his own sign, which was his hat. He typically would not wear his sheriff's hat. Everybody knew that. So when the feds contacted him, he put his hat on and he would go visit all the small neighborhoods. Here's your sign. Didn't have to say a word. Now what's fun about that though is he would go into the phone operator. So here in Templeton, remember, small 200, 250 people, we had all kinds of stuff. We had a phone office, we had a car dealership at one point, an implement at one point. We had a convent, a school, a jeweler, and that was all back at that time, okay? So he went into the phone office, and I don't know if you guys know much about how it worked back then, but I love the stories about it. So if you were a phone operator, and there was 3 that worked at this phone office, he was related to 2. So he knew. But you have a phone operator, somebody calls, wants to get a hold of somebody else that's from this area, okay? So they're gonna call in, they're gonna talk to the phone operator. She's gonna visit with them a little bit, okay? Then she's gonna contact whoever you're trying to reach. She's gonna visit with them a little bit. And then she's gonna connect the 2 of you, and she is going to listen to your phone call. Yeah. They were known as the biggest gossips around. Well, the sheriff's related to 2, he knows that, okay? So, hat on, goes in to the phone office and has a nice visit with whoever's working. What's going to happen the rest of the day? Anybody she talks to is going to know. The sheriff stopped in here today. Did I tell you he had his hat on? He looks so good in that today. There you go, message passed. Innocently. But here's a kicker. So, of those other businesses, one of those, the jeweler, was actually very much against alcohol. Very much so. In fact, he was known for writing letters to the feds to try and tattletale. Okay? Why did he have to write letters?
Because Snoopy was there.
He couldn't make a phone call. If he would make a phone call, everybody knew he was ratting on him. So he had to write letters. I'm going to run through and just tell you my version of and how it would have really affected us, okay? So I would already have worked out an agreement ahead of time with Alphonse because he would be my supplier, okay? I would know that his white horse, if he tied it up to his front fence, that's my sign that I have a batch ready to go, okay? I would already have a specific location picked out with Alphonse so he knew where to drop it off. And then also I would know how to get payment to him, okay? All right, so I see the white horse. I know I gotta go to my location and pick up my bottles. So we're gonna say my location is probably my own field, probably 2 miles to the west of town. I've gotta go to the north side of that section of field, and I've gotta walk into post number 30. Gotta come in from the east, 2930. Okay, so I'm at my post. I would pull up my post. There's my bottle.
Wow, you're a genius.
Yeah. Now, if there was multiple bottles, there would have been wire tied around or wrapped around the neck of the bottle so that you could pull them all out together. Yep. So, okay, so technically they started selling Templeton Rye legally in 2006, okay? Well, nobody knew it was going to become quite as popular as what it did. It was very popular. So we couldn't keep up with production. So Indiana got involved because of that. There's a distillery in Indiana that literally does startup companies. So they don't produce their own alcohol, they only produce for other companies. So because our need was growing and we couldn't supply it fast enough, we started getting their help. And that was a company, a distilling company in Indiana. They were producing for us, trying to get us up and going. Well, then it was, well, we're still selling so much we can't keep up. So then they had to keep producing for us. So they got involved to help get us going. And then this facility, this building and the barrel warehouse, they were started in 2016. We had to find a backer, somebody with enough money. Well, it so happens the guy that has that distillery, he likes to be backing other facilities. So we got him in and we were able to build these two buildings. And in 2018 is when we went back to everything here.
Everything what?
Everything was produced here.
Everything's produced here now?
Yep, since 2018.
Okay, gotcha.
And then all of the product that was produced and being aged in facilities down there in Indiana was all shipped back. And from the time these two buildings opened up, it took approximately 6 months to get all those barrels back. Templeton Rye, it looks like this. We call it a rough grind. Now, this is 95% rye, 5% malted barley. That's our mash bill. It tells you right here, okay? So that's what the computer is milling it up to. Once it's milled up, it's going to then go through those pipelines that come out kind of in the back through an auger system, and those are then going to come out over our heads right here. Now, did any of you know that we're also making bourbon? Bourbon. We're not selling it yet. They started making bourbon in 2019, but it's still aging. And they keep changing their minds. So originally I was told 2024. Last I was told, the earliest is January 25, but it could be 27. They can't make up their minds. So, but bourbon, instead of being 95% rye, 5% malted barley, bourbon, the one we're making, is about 80% corn, 15% rye, 5% malted barley. Here's the legalities of it. So remember those laws in the 50s? Okay. American rye whiskey had to be at least 51% rye in its mash bill. Okay? And no sugar. That's where the malted barley came in. Okay? But we're 95%, we meet that. It then has to go into an American white oak barrel. That barrel has to be brand new, and it has to be charred on the inside. Now there's 4 levels of charring to choose from. We use the darker level, which is level 4. Okay? The product has to stay within that specific barrel for at least 2 years. Yep. Okay. Now, bourbon, other than those ingredients, that mash bill follows those same rules. So it makes it easy to switch back and forth. So that's why we can make both of those two products. Now, I told you there's also corn whiskey I was going to tell you about. Did you get to try some of that today when we get to the tasting? Okay, here's the difference between corn whiskey and bourbon. Both corn, right? Okay. So I told you that the bourbon has to be at least 51% corn. That's part of those regulations. Okay, bourbon has to be at least 80% corn. Well, our bourbon is 80% corn. So what's the difference? You're aging. You don't have to age corn whiskey. You could sell it right off the still. But if you do decide to age it, and the one you tried today is aged, it has to be aged in either a used barrel or a brand new barrel that is not charred. The one you're going to try today was aged in a used barrel. Okay? Makes sense? No, there's a lot of little intricacies.
Yeah.
500,000 annual gallons of original proof whiskey. That's what we're capable of producing with this facility. That number right there makes us the largest distilling facility in Iowa. Second in size to us is half of that at 250,000, and that's Cedar Ridge out of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Okay, this here talks about the whiskeys of the world. Really, I talked about what it takes to be American rye whiskey and what it takes to be the bourbon, all of that. But I want to point out a couple things. Scotch. A lot of people don't realize this. One of those laws that they created in the 50s was that Scotch makers, which you're only going to find in Scotland, by the way, they have to age their Scotch in used barrels, used whiskey barrels. So some of our barrels will go back through the cooperage and be shipped to Scotland to be used by Scotch makers. Yeah, because we go through a whole lot of barrels. I mean, you can imagine if everyone has to be brand new, there's 54,000 out there right now, you know, we're real close.
Whiskey versus whiskey. What is the difference? Is there any difference, just a word or what?
It's how you're spelling it.
Like,
EY versus no E. In the United States, it should all have an E. It's actually, believe it or not, this is funny. Countries that have E's in their names, United States, Ireland, anything that has an E in their name, we spell it with an EY. If the country does not, like Canada, Scotland, Japan, they spell it without the E. It's just one of those weird trivia facts. It's no different than like bourbon. So everybody used to think, including me, that bourbon had to come from Kentucky.
Yeah.
It was never a thing. It was never a law. People just, because that was really where it started, people always assumed that. So it was an unspoken law. Couple things. Number one, American white oak is a pretty porous wood all of itself, okay? But the whole point of the charring is two things. Number one, it opens up the wood a little bit more so that your alcohol, when it comes in, will actually start soaking into the wood. It will do that on its own too, but that helps to open it up a little more. It also gives it color and flavor. Because the process is, so your original barrel, made perfectly brand new, charred on the inside. Alcohol goes in, and even though these beautiful people make these beautiful barrels by hand, no screws, no nails, just metal pieces and wood pieces, and they put them in like a puzzle. Okay, that alcohol is going to try to find any crack or crevice it can. Okay, that's fine, it's going to happen. But as the wood starts to soak up the alcohol, it also expands, which cuts off any of those little leaks, okay, or should. Now, the reason you want your barrel warehouse to be temperature gauged, I want to call it, okay, so like ours, I said low 50, high of 82. We actually want that variation because the warm temperatures will help the alcohol soak into the wood. When it soaks into the wood, it's not only picking up the flavors from the char, but also the wood. Then you get those cold temperatures. Those cold temperatures then mean that the wood is going to push the alcohol back out of it, back into the center of the barrel. So if you keep doing that process over the time frame that it ages, it's going to keep pulling more flavors and more colors from this. So that's what the goal is. Now there's a lot of controversy when you talk to different companies though about what's the best temperatures to do this, how long should they be in those temperatures, things like that. Part of that is actually why our new barrel warehouse is a different color. Because we're in Iowa where it's cooler, we're not getting those hot temperatures to last in the building as long as we really want it to. So we're going to go with a darker building, which will hopefully hold the heat a little bit better. All right, now this is what we call the angel share. You've ever heard that term before? Ah, okay. So any of this, and also what's soaked into the wood. And then also, if you've ever noticed on some distilleries, it's black on the outside. Could be black on their buildings, like people a lot of times think it's smoke or mold. It's not. It's actually sugars from the evaporation of your alcohol. Those sugars, once they make it outside the building into the heat, caramelize, which turns it black. So it's sugars on the outside of the buildings. All of that is considered the angel share, and the angel share is the share you will never get back. Keep in mind that evaporation, the seepage, all of that type of stuff does matter in the long run too. Not only because it's a little bit leaking out, but how much evaporation, how much leakage, things like that. A Templeton Rye aged in a barrel for 4 to 6 years, and typically closer to the 6th year, it will lose around 10 gallons of alcohol. Templeton Rye 10-year loses 40 to 50% of its contents in aging. That's why it's more expensive.
Okay, we got done with the whiskey tasting, and it was very good. And 2 things we tasted. We tasted the 6-year Town Reserve Rye, Templeton Rye whiskey, and we also tasted the 10-year corn whiskey. And it's pretty interesting how they have you taste it. They give you a little tiny shot glass, and they say just take a little bit, put it on your tongue, if you can keep it there for about 30 seconds, and then swallow that little tiny bit, and then take the next one, just a little tiny sip again. And it's amazing how that enables you to taste those little vanilla notes and nutty notes that's in that whiskey. But it's amazing going through that whole Harvest Host location, and we really enjoyed it, had a good time. In fact, we had such a good time that, of course, I ended up buying some Templeton Rye. Let me just show you 2 bottles of the 6-year rye, and then I bought, because we don't really have good whiskey glasses, so I bought 2 of these glasses. Very cool. I've always wanted, for years I've wanted some glasses like that to make my old fashions in. And then we bought something very unusual. You know, you were looking, you saw the char in those barrels. Let me show you what it looks like here. It's a burlap bag. And inside, the char is something they actually sell. They they put it in a food saver bag, and this is the char from the inside of the barrel, and oh, does it smell good because it's had the whiskey in there. And what some people do is they take this char and they'll put it in water, they'll boil it just to the point of boiling it a little bit, and then they one person, they said they use a coffee filter to strain out all this charcoal, and then they have the water left over that has this smoky flavor to it, and then they make ice cubes with it. That is exactly what I intend to do. Other people use it to, they'll put it in their grill and flavor their meat when they're smoking meat, or they're cooking on the grill. They'll use this as a flavor in the smokiness. So, yeah, pretty cool. We had a great time. I hope you enjoyed watching that tour. If you get a chance to stop at that Templeton Distillery, it's a Harvest Host member, and the people there are just really fantastic. Very, very nice and considerate. And there's plenty of places. Well, they've got the number of places to park on the website, but it's very nice and level there. And yeah, so anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time.